So a couple quick announcements while we're getting set up here. Both of them are summer or are research related, not summer necessarily. Um, so one is Innovation Scholars. This is the second year St. Scholastica is taking part in this program. Um, it's a program run. It started at Mayo Clinic, but now it's branched to a number of other healthcare organizations in the Twin Cities and in Rochester, and they work with a number of universities. So our university is one of them, St. Scholastica is one. So we pick four students to be on a research team. We're given a real world problem from a healthcare organization, and the students work on that project between now and like the end of February. And then you present it down in the Twin Cities to representatives from this company and this area. This current one is going to be related to data analysis of home healthcare data solutions. It's for students, usually varied majors. So again, we'll certainly want at least one computer or data analysis student. Will probably want someone from healthcare, someone from business or marketing here, and probably and a fourth student there. You have to be a junior or senior there. You have to apply. There's an application, short application, and then it will be a short interview for that. But consider applying to for that project. The other one that's going on right now is a summer research McNair. McNair is a program. It's run on campus, but it includes students from UMD and somewhere else, UWS, maybe. I'm trying to think. So what that is, a summer research project. You work with the faculty mentor to work on a project to do research. This past year, Allie, if you want to know how it went, Allie was worked on it, and we did some robot and Alexa work there. And you got a stipend for it. And again, same with this other one, you get a stipend for, I think it's a $1,500 stipend for Innovation Scholars. And again, you get a stipend for this stuff. And it takes up a fair amount of your summer here. You've got to be, for McNair, you've got to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. And we have to hit some of these other things, first generation and an underrepresented group, qualifying for some financial aid. So some combination of those. There's an eligibility tool you can fill out to see if you qualify for that. So if you're interested in that. So again, this summer, I'd be willing to do another research, summer research with McNair for that. And again, that one is sophomores or juniors for that. Online students can apply for these, but to tell you the truth, although they do come with stipends, my experience is that the stipends are never near enough to cover, what, so that it could be affordable. Most of my online students could not work for summer for the stipend you're given. The money it's helpful, but it's not, doesn't replace a full-time job here. So, but you can consider it. Okay, questions on those? So how'd you like Matt's visit on Tuesday? You find Matt helpful, interesting to talk to? So I find his career path interesting. I've known that we've had a number of students who've gone to what I kind of consider the tier one IT organizations, the Apples, the Googles, the Facebooks, or something like that. But it's interesting. I don't think I know of a single student who really was hired directly there. Most of them have gone out, worked a couple of years, done their 5 years somewhere else, and then gone to Apple or Google or something like that at that point. And Matt's, certainly fit that area. He also, graduated at a time similar to this. Right now, the tech industry with AI and a bunch of the layoffs on the East Coast is tight. The job market's a little tighter in the tech industry than in some of the other industries now. And so you saw that he where he got his first job wasn't necessarily where he wanted to go, but he was able to take that and then transition quite smoothly into positions where he really liked to go there for that. So we'll have, again, next week, we'll have two guest speakers on the same day. These are two online students who have graduated and work in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. So they'll be coming and visiting us. All right, well, we Zoom in next week. So, okay, what are we going to do today? I'm going to just talk a little bit more about dependencies here. Not too much because we want to get into during the learning activity for this stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit more, and let me bring up our textbook here too. Sorry. So we want to talk about some of the way we manage dependencies and how we set that up. I'm going to jump to that section here. We talked briefly about interfaces, and again, we'll be doing a lot with interfaces in this class and how things are like the idea of an interface. It should describe what can be done, where a class describes how it can be done. And so an interface is, I always kind of think of it as it's just a plug or an it's a connection, and you can plug in, you can say this class will do that connection. Other classes then can use that. It's just a nice little interface. That's why it's called an interface. It lets you connect software in a nice, significant way. And so we'll be working a lot. And again, next unit is just all interfaces. So we'll spend all week next week and again, we'll try to back up and review what an interface is and how we use it there. So if you haven't seen them that much, you'll see them a lot. And it's a good review for those who've been using them more. So, and again, we went through, I think we were talking about this one, where we're talking about we want to avoid code where we will where we declare a new object inside the code. So in this example, we're like declaring, to get a password, declaring a new repository. And the question is, do we need to do that? Is there some way around that for this stuff? Because from a testing and maintainability point of view, that's not great here. So we'll look at things like factory to create these here. It talks about the lack of testability for this here. And so it talks about, can we pass this on to a later point? So this moves this creation of the user repository to the actual change user password area. And so until then, we're just passing around the user ID. The thing I will note is that you might notice the user ID is not an integer here. It's a GUID. I don't know how to pronounce that. And that is just it's like a long integer, well, it can be actually string too. That's a built-in type in Microsoft world land for storing IDs, and it's used a lot in their databases, a lot in their code. And so that's just a built-in type for IDs. So you will see that used a lot. So just so you know, you can imagine this as a string or an integer. And again, it can be either for that. So okay, so let's talk about dependency injection. That's another thing we'll get to. And again, we'll have a whole chapter on dependency injection later on for this. And the idea of this is that rather than like here, let's say we had an account controller and it needed a security service object so it could create a user or change the user password here. So and again, we see this a lot we have a class, and in that class, we have a constructor, and in that constructor, we create all the other objects we're going to need. In this class, just one. We're going to need a security service, or we're going to instantiate it in the constructor and then use it later on. So that's a pretty common, what I'd almost call it anti-pattern now. It's what we use and teach in like Java 2 sort of stuff, is that in your constructor, instantiate any other objects you're going to need. So instead of doing this, we will pass in, as the constructor will pass in this object here. So we'll pass in the object for this. So we'll have our constructor here, and it will have a parameter, and we'll pass in that security service object. Not only that, but to make it more universal, we'll pass it in as an interface so that we can have various types of objects that can implement that. From testing point of view, we can pass in kind of a null or a stub security service that just pretends to be a security service for our testing. And then in real cases, we can pass a real one in. And then later on, if we're going to change our security system from one system to another, we could change it somewhere else, and this code doesn't have to change because as long as it implements this interface, it works fine. And then we just have a variable here, a local variable, where we store the security service. So we pass that in. So that's called dependency injection. We inject the dependency into the class by passing it into with the constructor for that. And again, we'll see that again and again in this class, where we'll be doing, like here, we're passing in a user repository. So again, we have a local variable user repository. It implements an interface. So then in our constructor here, we're passing in that for that. So we'll often now be creating in some class, some base class, we'll create a whole bunch of objects that we need, and then we'll just pass those around to the different objects. And then what's nice about that is that 90% of our code won't have to change very much. We can in our base code change maybe what objects we create there, and then we pass them around. And that also will help for testing, because when we do testing, we can just pass in a dummy object for the things, the dependencies we have. So we'll see that. Yeah, I'm not going to get into some of these assemblies and that sort of stuff. I'm going to skip over that because, yeah, that's, I think, somewhat out of date. A lot of this DLL stuff, I'm going to leave. This talks about services and endpoints. So again, often we go to this client server model, or where one object, one part of your code will be getting access to another part of the code, and rather than calling it directly, we'll have some sort of interface, not interface, because that's a special thing, some sort of connection between this sort of stuff. It might be like a remote procedure call, but now it's often a REST API for this. There's a whole service discovery stuff. And again, this is all kind of old too. So I'm actually going to, most of this service stuff here, I'm going to skip over, because that's why we're bringing in all this microservices stuff. That microservices has basically replaced all this. This is talking, again, this is where microservices came from, where we're connecting things with HTTP, with web interfaces here with REST API calls for this. And there's a service discovery stuff. But again, this is all out of date here. So again, we're going to skip over all this service stuff, and instead we're going to look at the microservice stuff. If you're not familiar with RESTful services, you might want to read this section. Microservices still use RESTful services. Again, RESTful services, how we use HTTP to call software methods from one place and pass data from one place to the other. So, if we have a project, rather than trying to bring in a dynamic link library and call a method through that there, we will, there'll be an API through a website. We'll issue an HTTP command to go get the data and get it back. And RESTful is generally a very low entry, low burden kind of interface for this. And that is what we'll see most of our microservices will use this. In fact, they use it so much that you will not often see the RESTful stuff is often kind of built into some of this stuff. So you will have a bunch of Docker containers running in different places, and you will be calling and passing the data between some code and another set of code you write through a RESTful service. And to tell you the truth, a lot of that will be hidden from you. You don't even have to worry about it as much, but just so you understand. And again, because our environment, Visual Studio will set up these Docker containers off. Well, we'll have to do some tweaking, but a lot of that will be set up for us. So again, you might want to read through this, but again, a fair amount. Some of this, again, RESTful stuff has not changed that much here. Dependency management with NuGet. Again, there's lots of dependencies management, and we have to use NuGet with Visual Studio, and you'll often just see it. We won't talk too much about it, but at times NuGet will have to load in. Often when we're doing something, NuGet will start up and have to install some packages that we need for something like that. A typical example might be, let's say we're parsing a JSON file and we want to use a JSON or the Google JSON parser or some other JSON parser. We'll do that include, and then NuGet may run in the background. Sometimes we have to tell NuGet exactly what to get to do it, but generally NuGet runs in the background. So, okay. I want to get down here to, and again, some of these other package managers, I'm not going to worry about. Here, layering, this is where I really want to get to today. How do we manage these complicated packages? And that's what we're going to do in our learning activity today. We often break data, our packages up into common methods. The user interface, the view, we often call these the views or the screens. The screens or views here. We'll have in one area, we have our data model, the user data, the product data, our database, our repository, connecting and reading those in are in another area. So we have our models, and then we have something that controls the interactions between the viewers and the views and the data models. And so again, we're often talking about some sort of model, view, controller method, or in this way, if sometimes we'll call them view models, they're slightly different. Model view models, controllers will be different ways of setting this up. So there's these common layering patterns. And again, if you've had Android, in Android development, we do that. We do, we define the layouts in XML files, I think, and interface with it. And we have these .c. We have these Java files that tie into those. So that's kind of the view end. And then we have our data models. And then there's actually a built-in view model class that sits there. And then we write controllers to kind of manage that all here. So, and even in game design, we talk about it, and we look at some examples of that in game design. So we see that here. So again, they talk about two layers, the user interface and the data access. That's a very simple setup. And again, by default, that's kind of what Android Studio does and what you often see in game design. But again, when you get a little bit more sophisticated, you're talking about some sort of user interface and then some sort of data access or control object here to kind of manage this, and then your actual data implementation here for this. And again, it depends on where you're getting your data from. If you're getting it from a SQL data server or a not SQL data server or files or wherever you're storing your data for that. We'll often be working with these CRUD operations, and our data access operations will be doing it. And so CRUD, of course, is create, read, update, delete. The four main things we have to generally do whenever we're working with a database or data out there. So here's our three-layer approach: user interface, business logic, and our data access stuff here. And talks a little bit about this and some things. One thing it starts to mention is object relational mapping. Often what you're doing is you're on the data and you're pulling in down here, you're pulling in from like an SQL or object, so you're pulling in, doing a query, an SQL query, and you're getting some sort of table-like object or SQL result back. And then you have to convert that into an actual class, a C++, a C# or a Java class. And that's the object relational mapping a relational database into your objects, your C# or your Java objects for that. It works similarly for non-SQL data. You're going out there and you're usually getting a JSON file back. And then with JSON, again, you have to take that JSON data and map it into an object. So even with non-SQL, we still often talk about this ORM, object relational mapping. And there are automated systems in most of these places where we'll do this. So often we don't have to manually map every data, every field in every table onto a field in our into our Java class or C# class. There's some library that'll help do that for us. And again, same with parsing JSON. There's a library that will generally often parse the JSON for us. I'm going to skip over this example stuff here, and I'm going to try to show you a little more recent one here. So we're going to try to jump into our learning activity. So again, this is what we're going to do: model, view, controller sort of idea with ASP.NET. I got instructions here to do this with VS Code and Visual Studio. Did you notice that Matt, I thought he would be using Visual Studio, but you notice he was using VS Code. That was his environment that he was coding in. So I'm really interested as we talk to more and more developers if we see more and more people using VS Code, because I'm beginning to wonder this class if we shouldn't convert the whole class to VS Code. So that's as we go through this term, we're going to watch that. So end of the term, we're going to have to decide next year if I should be teaching this with VS Code. But this year, we're going to teach it with both here, especially for Mac. You need to be using VS Code. So we're going to do this part. Okay. And again, this one, I want you to create this from scratch here just to kind of see how it does. So rather than clone a repository. So that means that you're going to have to submit this and not use GitHub there. Because I just want to get you to see kind of this whole clone. I almost did it in GitHub, but I thought it's useful to have you start from basically nothing. So again, I'm going to create a new project in my Visual Studio. And we want a .NET Model View Controller platform. So I want to make sure I'm in C# here. I don't want this to be a library. I'm going to go to all project types here. And there's a lot of ASP.NET projects, and most of them we don't want. So this core web app with Razor Pages, this API one with RESTful API, again, we don't want those. We don't want this one. I'm just going to keep scrolling down. I want something that says Model View Controller. So here's the one I want. ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller. Again, it'll run on Windows, Mac OS, or Linux. It's the Model View Controller one, and it's the core ASP.NET Core one. It implements using RESTful HTTP services. So I'm going to click on that. So you want to find that project type. Again, make sure it's the Model View Controller one here. Hit next. Give it some name. So this is a Model View Controller one, so I'm just putting that in the name. And then I'm going to hit next. Now, one thing, watch on this one, we don't want to do HTTPS support here. So make sure you unconfigure that one. Again, I still don't, when I'm running Google Chrome, again, with HTTPS, we need some certificates of authorization to make sure this is how HTTPS works. There's a certificate exchange here to get the private key set up, and this sets up a temporary certificate service, and Google Chrome seems to not like that anymore. So I'm just going to not do HTTPS here. Then hit create. Okay. Oh. Well, I should disable Docker support also. This is gonna by default run in a Docker desktop, and I really don't need that. But I'm gonna start. I've got if you didn't disable, I should have disabled that. Well, under HTTPS, there's a thing to disable Docker stuff. I should have disabled that also. I forgot to check that. So we may have to again. And it might be worthwhile. I don't want to do the stupid survey. Okay. So we want to get to this point where you have, yeah, it's running in a Docker file. I don't really want that. Okay, let me see. I'm going to run this and see. You might want to go back and just recreate this project and just disable the Docker support here. I'm going to run this and see how slow it is. Again, I'm trying to minimize our complexity here. And eventually we will do this with Docker, but I didn't want to get into the Docker stuff yet here. If you get it started up and hit run, it should open up a web page like this here, and that's what we want it to be able to run and get this web page for this. So I think I'm going to leave mine in this Docker area. But if you don't do Docker, it'll say run in HTTP up here for this. I'm gonna mine's working. I've got Docker installed. I have a login already for Docker, so I'm gonna do that. But again, if you're having trouble getting it to run here, just go back when you create a new project. There's two checkboxes, one to disable HTTPS and the one below that to disable Docker support. And you really don't need Docker support. That just adds a layer of complexity here for this. So let me know how that goes. And again, what we want to do is run this. And I'm just going to show you some of the code here then while you're getting there. So there are three main folders here, a models folder, a view folder, and subfolders in there, and then a controller folder with a home controller. So there's a home view, there's not a home model, and there's a home controller here. So again, model, view, controller, MVC sort of setup for this. And again, then this runs, it'll start up a basic web server here for hosting this, and it should display this here. And I'll just note for those of you on a Mac, you have to do it a little differently in the Mac or in VS Code. Rather than doing a new project here, you have to use the command line to create a new project. So you have to, at the command line, you have to do .NET new MVC and then give it a name for that. Then it creates the project like we did, and then it should tell you where in one of the output screens what host to do. Notice when I run this, let's see this. When I run this, it'll open up a web page and it'll say localhost : and some port number, and it'll be different every time you kind of use this. And so if you're in a Mac when you do that. So here, so Michael, make sure you're opening the folder. I think you were asking like in VS Code how to open up these files. Make sure at this point, let me go back. Make sure after you create the project, you go open folder, not open file. And you want to open the whole folder that was created in here. And then it should list all the files here. And then if you double click on a C# one in VS Code, actually, I think it's on this side in VS Code, depending on how you can figure it out. You click on that, it should open it up. So let me know if that doesn't work.
I was referring to the full files like the .cs and the .cs HTML files in the later portion of that. The
Okay.
ones bright space, they don't go anywhere.
Oh, they don't. These, right, where I
Yeah,
say use this code.
yeah, those ones don't go anywhere. It's an error 404 for me anyways.
It isn't. So you just have to pretend you're me. Okay, let me change the security real quick on this. Oh yeah, this is a private one. Okay, sorry about that. Let me change this project to public.
Also, there is a different way to create projects with VS Code. I
Okay,
can I can uh, come by and show you when I'm in
yeah, that'd
school.
be fine. That'd be good to see. I just have to do this login. Okay, try those links now. I think the project will be public now. Okay,
Yep,
all
that
right,
works.
good. Okay, so how are we doing in class? Are we able to create this project? You able to run this? Anyone want help? Okay, so like we're just gonna want to kind of look at this, and I want you to just, I mean, the goal of this is just kind of get a feel for how complicated software will get when we start doing model view controllers and stuff like that. There. Um, so we've got controllers, models. We're going to kind of get used to this, so we're going to create our own controllers and views and that sort of stuff. So let me bring this up again. So we're going to create a hello world controller. We've got to do a hello world, I think. So, and again, we're going to use some built-in logic in Visual Studio for this. So I'm going to go under click on the controllers folder, and then I'm going to do, if I'm on that folder, if I say add, the top thing is add a controller. So the little built-in thing to add a controller. Now, if you are in VS Code, this isn't available. You just have to add a new class and paste the code in here. So again, we're just going to do a controller. We're just going to do this empty controller and add that in. Now, one thing we have to watch the naming convention here. We don't want, there's a one there by default there, and we want to call it home controller no one, because there's a naming convention in this environment where controllers have to be named controller, and then the name of the controller has to be before it, and there can't be anything after the word controller in the name. So we just have to say home controller no one there. Oh, I want a hello controller, not a home controller. So I'm going to do that again. Add controller. I want a hello controller. And again, no one. Because it's going to be hello world, we're going to say. So hello controller, because I already have the home controller there. So that'll create this hello controller in your controllers folder, because that's where I was there and I clicked hello for this stuff. And what this does is return a view. Now we're gonna do this. I'm just gonna show you a shortcut to show that this is going to work. You can do this, but I'm just gonna do it and then I'm gonna delete it. Just to show you how this kind of works here, I'm gonna not return a view. I'm just gonna return a content object. I'm gonna return HTML actually. Like I'm just gonna say hello world. As HTML content there. So content is a special thing that will generate HTML for me, basically, and I'm going to return that. The view does that, but I'm just going to show you how the controller works here. So now if I run this, again, this is the hello controller. I have to remember that name. I'm going to run this. The website's going to start up. Here. Now, there's a home controller here and my localhost. Now, to get to the hello controller, I have to go localhost colon port, and then I have to say the directory /hello here. And that's the controller. And if I say /hello, it'll look for hello controller. That's why the naming is so important here. And if I say /hello, it just says hello world, because that is what I was returning here. So again, this is kind of how we get to that controller. But I don't want to return this content here. I'm actually going to return a view. So let's do that next. Now, if I run this, there's not going to be hello view. So it will give me an error. I'll show you the error. If I type in here, if I type /hello, it's going to give me an error. Index is not found. Following locations were searched. Views /hello/index. So it's looking in the hello, inside the view folder, inside hello, and looking for something called index here. And I did not create the index controller. And the index controllers, if you've done any web development, is kind of the default web page. If you go to a folder, it's going to look for index.html or CIS HTML or whatever. So again, this is not working. So getting back to my instructions here, add 3 views to the hello controller, the default index. So we're going to do that first. So how do I add that? So notice there's this index right here. So I'm in the home controller. I'm clicking on index. And again, a lot of this help is relative to what I click on. I'm going to click on index, and now I'm going to do add view. And if I'm clicking on this, one of these actions here to add view, it'll add it. I'm just going to add an empty razor view. And an index is fine. And it will create it. Now, it should, in the views folder, create hello and create this index.cs HTML file. And Michael and anyone else on a Mac at VS Code, you're probably just going to have to do this manually. You're just going to have to go to views, create a folder, add folder, add a new folder. Inside that folder, create a new CS HTML file called index. And there's not a whole lot in here. Okay, here's a question. How many of you know HTML? If you know HTML, can you just kind of nod your head? Maybe about half of you? Okay. If you know HTML, you can go crazy on HTML sort of stuff. For those of you who don't know HTML, we're just going to do really simple HTML stuff for this. So like HTML works with tags with greater than, less than. So I'm just going to say less than, H1 is a heading, and I'm going to type in something like hello world. And then I bracket. Oops, I did that wrong, sorry. Because I don't really know HTML either that well. Okay, oops, there, oops. See if I can get this to actually work. Okay, H1, hello world, and then the end tag, which is the same as the start tag with a backslash in it. So this will do that. Now I can actually add a paragraph tag after that if I want. I can do a paragraph and then say, this is my hello page. Okay. Now this is not HTML up here. It's in yellow because this is not an HTML file. This is a CS, a C# HTML file. So I can mix C# and HTML in this file for that. So I can mix them together. And that's what ASP active server pages are set up for doing, mixing code like C# in HTML so you can code that. But okay, so that's all you really need is a header here. For now, if I run this, and I click up in the URL and say /hello, it'll display my hello world page. So here's my heading, my H1 heading, hello world, and here's my paragraph afterwards. Wow, that's so exciting, Tom. Can't believe we made a hello world web page already. So, and again, so this is set up so we have a controller. We go to that controller. Inside that controller, we just return the view. And this is all set up so that the view, there's underlying the technology here, the view then looks for a folder called hello, because this hello controller here looks at a folder called hello. So it goes to views, goes to hello, and looks for, and again, if I didn't specify a controller here, looks for the index. Now I could specify the controller name here. I could say index, open up view index, and that would work out the same way for this here. Okay, so let's add some more views here. So I'm going to do a Minnesota, Wisconsin one. You can do whatever you want here. So what I'm actually going to do is inside my controller, I'm going to duplicate this method call and add two more method calls here. And I'm going to call one Minnesota and one Wisconsin. And I'm going to tell it to open up the Minnesota view and the Wisconsin view. And again, I'm not going to get into too much stuff for this, but our controller, what it'll do is look at it. It looks at the URL that's passed in / whatever, and if it's a / hello, it'll go to the hello controller, and if it's another / hello / mn, it'll go to the mn action here, and it'll do something, and this will then tell it to run the Minnesota, the mn view here. I don't need this anymore. So, okay. So all I'm doing is my controller is just telling it what view. Now I don't have these views. I should maybe create them. So I can right click on this and say add view, add empty view, and call it again, Minnesota view, CSS HTML, and have it that way. So you can, from the controller, you can create a view. I mean, these are just files. If I go over to views, open up my views, I should have a hello folder, go there. I can just say add a C# class and, oops, not a C# class. Don't do that. Add a CSS HTML, add a view. and do an empty view. And I'm just going to call this one Wisconsin. So I just created it over here. And again, in these views, I'm just going to type in my very fancy, complicated HTML and say, in Wisconsin, I'm going to say hello from Wisconsin. And in Minnesota, I'm going to type in hello from Minnesota. We could actually delete a bunch of this garbage code. These are actually more like comments and stuff above here. We don't need that. But later on, we'll see where we actually get some data in there. So I'm going to leave that there for now. But if you want to clean that up, you're fine if you just want to have just HTML in there. Okay, so now I've got a Minnesota controller, a Minnesota action and a Wisconsin action. If I run this, I can go to my actions. I can type in /hello, and that'll get to my default web page. But then if I type hello, so that's the same as saying hello /index. Because if you go to hello, it loads the index page. Now, if I want to go to Minnesota, I'd say /hello/Minnesota, and it says hello from Minnesota. If I go to Wisconsin, I type hello /Wisconsin, and it'll load up Wisconsin. So see if you can get that point where your URLs here, and you've got this and you've got these views set up correctly. Okay, I'll stop and we'll see how we're doing. I'm gonna just do a little shortcut here because I want to just show you. No, I don't want to be typing in these. You notice there's this nice, every page has this header at the top, and there's home and privacy. I can click on those links. I would like to put my hello and maybe my Minnesota and my Wisconsin one here for that. So I'd like to maybe put that, or at least the hello one up there. So I'm going to do that here. Now, how do I edit this header for this? So is that in a view for this? So if I look into views, the hello view doesn't have anything about the header there. But there's a special folder, a special view called shared there. And inside shared, all the views access the shared stuff. And inside shared, there's a layout. And if I go into layout, there's my entire web page here. And again, we're not going to get into web stuff too much, but there's a header and there's the body. And inside the body is the navigation bar, which is that top bar, the container, which is where the view goes, and then the footer stuff at the bottom here. So this is the code that brings this all in. Again, we're not going to go into too much detail on that, but under the body header, that's the top menu, there are these sections to display home and privacy and what they work on. So I'm actually going to copy, and again, you don't have to do this. I just wanted to show you and do it because I'm lazy and don't want to type so much. I'm just going to copy those and do a couple more of those. So I want, besides home, index and privacy there, I'm going to also do hello. Okay, so again, the stuff between the anchor tags here is what's displayed. I'm going to say hello. I'm going to say Minnesota. So this is what's actually displayed in these tags, and Wisconsin. The controller is the controller that runs. And so this is, all of these use the hello controller. The ones we added that new hello controller. So that says go to hello controller. And then the action is what method inside the hello controller to run. So if I just go to hello, I want to run the index method. If I go to, if I say Minnesota, I want to run the MN action. And here for privacy, for Wisconsin, I want to do that. So again, that basically in this HTML, in the header, it says, go to hello controller, and then there's different actions, specify which of the actions to run. And this will say, so this is what's displayed in the menu, the actual words. This is the controller that if they click on it to go to, and then this is the action within that controller to run. So if I do that, if I make those changes, then I should get this nice website up here where I can go hello or Minnesota or Wisconsin. Now, you can also link these. There's a way in HTML so I can have a page with, I could say Minnesota, Wisconsin with links here. I use my anchor tags, that's HTML 101 kind of stuff. Again, you can easily do that in this page and just link to this URL, the Minnesota URL, or, these are different URLs. We could do all that. But again, this is not an HTML or a website design class, so we're not going to worry about that. Okay, so that's our first part here, where we did a model view controller. Except you're going, Tom, we didn't do a model. We did views and controllers. Why didn't we do a model? Did I miss that? No, we didn't. We didn't do the model because I thought this was a little complicated. So now we're going to do, we just did a view controller, that half. We didn't do any data. Right? There's no data involved in this sort of stuff. So the next step we're going to do is do an actual model view controller with the students. So you ready to do the second part of this? Okay, so we're going to make we're going to want to display student information here. So we're going to make a new controller called the student controller. So remember, we click on controllers and we do add controller. And now we're going to want to do one of these controllers. Let's see what I tell you to do. Okay, we're going to do the read-write controller here. So we're going to do the read-write controller actions. And again, the name, we're going to name it student, and it can't have a 1 in it. Student controller, no 1. Student controller. Here. So this will bring up a controller with more options here. We have an index, a details, a create, a couple creates, a couple edits, a couple deletes here. So basically all of our CRUD stuff, create, edit, delete. Oops, I guess there isn't an update in here necessarily. So that'll create this, there should be a student controller here. Okay. Let's see if we can do this index. So we're going to make an index view for this stuff. So again, I'm going to close out some of this stuff. Let's see. Oh, and I forgot, I want to also create a student model. I haven't done that yet. So I jumped to 2. I want to create our student data model. This is a model view controller. So go to your models here, right click and add a class. So under models, I'm going to add a class and give it some name. Now, normally I would just call this student, but since this is a model view controller, I'm going to call it student model. No one else except in this class probably calls it student model. Everyone else would just call it a student object. So you can actually, if you want, you can call it student, but I'm going to call it student model just to make sure in our mind that this is a student, a data model. So this is our data model for student. I'm just going to call it student model, and it's in the model class. I'm all the folder here. Here's my student. I'm going to want to store their ID. Auto wants me to do that already. It looks like the name that wants to do that, and not the description. Well, let's just do. I want to do a public int credits. Let's see. Student ID, name, and credits are what I want. So, an integer for the ID, a string for the name, and int for the credits. Now you might be thinking, I thought she said we always use these GUID things here for IDs, and we do, but I think that's a little confusing for you right now, and it's not that important. So we're just going to use integers because you know what an integer is, and we know how to input an integer and that sort of stuff. So we're just going to use this. Now, we do want to do one more thing. And I didn't put it here. We've got to, here's the code. I'm going to jump over to the VS Code side of it and show you the code. We want to put an annotation here to mark the ID as the key. So for our database stuff, I'm just going to type in bracket, square bracket, key, square bracket. And then it should automatically add the using system component data annotations to the top for us. So yeah, we're going to mark the ID as the key for this. I'm going to do, while we're doing this, let's add a couple constructors here. I have an extra semicolon there. Okay. And again, I'm just going to right click on this and do quick actions and do generate a constructor. So I'm going to highlight those three things and generate a constructor. So it'll generate this constructor here. I'm also going to generate a blank constructor. I think if I just right click without anything, nope. Add, yeah, generate constructor. So I'm going to generate a constructor without any things. Now, I'm going to actually initialize all the objects if I create a stuff. So I'm just going to initialize it with some dummy variables. So the ID is going to be -1. The name's going to be nothing. And the credits is going to be like -999 or something like that. So I'm just going to have, when I create a student without any parameters, it's going to set up some default values. If I specify a constructor with these, it'll just save those into my values. So I have my stuff. And again, if you right click, or if you highlight things, do quick action or Control plus, it should generate some of these for you, basically. And again, we're doing it here. This is where AI helps. And again, I don't know if this code helps, but if you have like Copilot does this, or again, any sort of AI, you can just say generate a class, a data model with this in C# and make a default constructor and a constructor that takes all three parameters, and AI will fill this in too. So that's right. Some people ask where I think AI is going. I think a lot of it is just filling in a lot of this stuff for us. And again, we're already there again, where you can just you can highlight code and say create the constructors or stuff like that. It just does more of that. Okay, so we have our data model for this, and we have our controller. Let's go back to our controller, our student controller, and look at that. So under the student controller, I'm going to go back here. Created the data model with the student ID, name, and credits. We created the student controller with the read-like templates here. Let's just wait a sec on the list of students. I'm just going to show you why we need that by creating the index controller. So I'm going to go here and create the index view. So I'm in my controller under index. I'm just going to say add view. I'm going to say eraser view this time. And it will set up some, so the name, if I do razor view, the name is going to be index. The template, I'm going to do this. I want it to list all the students. So I'm going to do list. And the data model here is going to be my student model. Okay, so again, I did a new view and I did not an empty view, but a razor view. Index is the name. Again, that's the default name. The list is the template. So it's just going to list all the students here. And then for the data model, I created my data model up here. I'm going to select that. And then I'm going to add that view. So again, go into your controller, click on right click on your index of your student controller and say add view, and then do the razor view for that. And then select the student data object and the list view. And eventually we want to get to this sort of list. Okay, so let's see if we can get to that.